Okay, so basically I want to talk about a few things here. So we see Meta, Amazon, Alphabet, and Microsoft intend to spend as much as $320 billion. I think the number is actually about $325 billion. Now, I want to talk about AMD and NVIDIA and a couple other things in this YouTube video. Kind of like get you to realize what's transpiring here. So if $320 billion is what just these four companies are going to spend. Now, Jensen said on the earnings call, on NVIDIA's last earnings call, he said that about 46% of their revenue comes from the hyperscalers. Okay, so now we know that all $320 billion is not going to go to NVIDIA, obviously, and that not all $320 billion in CapEx is likely going to AI, but probably a significant portion. I would imagine, let's just call it $275 billion. Let's take $50 billion off the top there, right, and just say the hyperscalers are spending $275 billion. NVIDIA's revenue last year cumulatively was somewhere in the neighborhood of, if I recall, let's see, $130 billion or so, right? Now, even for NVIDIA to capture most of that spend that these guys are doing, let's call it 275, they would double revenue again, right? Just on the hyperscalers, who are 46% of their. So let's even say they pull $200 billion, right? And the hyperscalers are only 40. That means NVIDIA is going to get, what, $400 billion in revenue this year from AI? Not a chance, right? Because you got to think that, like, some of that money goes to Broadcom for ASICs. Some of it will go to AMD. And if you're like most people, you don't think very much is going to go to AMD, right? And then on top of that, some of it's going to have to go to like companies like Aristanet, networking companies like SMCI. Companies like that are going to be involved and take a chunk. Okay, so, but let's say NVIDIA got $200 billion of that, and it's 46%. So you would say over another $200 billion in spend is coming from other players. Do we really believe that NVIDIA is going to triple revenue this year? Do we? Right? There's no way. There's no way. So I want to go through a few things. There's no way, which leaves a huge opening for like one or two other companies. Broadcom with ASICs, but it's not the same. You know what I'm saying? But the huge benefactor, and I think that not a lot of people are seeing or noticing, is AMD. And now I'm going to go here. So I want to show you guys something. So if you watch Jeremy's videos, you already know that 60% of AAII investor sentiment is bearish and less than 20%. Now, let's just go, that's the 1 year bearish high, and we can go to more historical data here, you know what I'm saying, and take a look. But I think that's the first time since 2022 when I looked earlier, right? Since right at the bottom of 2022 crash. Now, this could not be the bottom, Things can get a lot uglier, and there's no doubt about that. But from my experiences, when you hit a bearish, you're at least going to find some sort. When you hit a bearish level of like this, you're going to at least find some sort of short-term bottom, and rather quickly. Also, I want to go into this. The fear and greed index is an extreme fear. And this is the third time since late December that we have had a below 20 reading. That is incredible. Not often we see a below 20 reading, but 3 times. Last week we had one. It came up yesterday to like 24, 25, and then came back. What was the close? Previous close 24, right? 1 week ago, extreme fear 22. So we've been in incredible extreme fear. Now let's take a look at like the timeline so we can have like an idea. So right here, it went below 20 that day. It went below 20 that day on December 19th, even though it says 22. I was watching it that day. Okay, and so we toyed around in fear, and we kind of just been saying in the fear the whole time. We hit a little bit of neutral there and a little bit of neutral there at the end, middle of February. But now we have gone, super extreme bearish, 60% negative sentiment on the AAI, right? And we have nothing but extreme fear here. Okay. We have extreme fear in market momentum, extreme fear in stock price strength, extreme fear in breadth, extreme fear in the put and call ratio. I'm assuming it's probably higher than this. CNN isn't very good at tracking it, but 0.81, which is, it could get worse. It could get 0.99. It could get, 9.3. It could even get, what is it here? 0.86, 0.85. 0.87, somewhere in there, right? Your market volatility, it just keeps spiking. Extreme fear, safe haven demand, extreme fear. What do we have? August 5th. Wow, right? I mean, this isn't nowhere. This isn't like the collapse of the August 5th yen carry trade where everything was going to collapse, right? You know what I mean? And then junk bond demand is an extreme greed, of course, right? So, now I want to move over here and I want to compare 1000X here. Okay, so we have NVIDIA, AMD, and Broadcom, AVGO. I kind of want to take a good hard look at this, right? And then I want to pull up FinViz's numbers too, because I'd like to look at more than just one site's numbers, just to have a good idea of where things might actually be. And I'm just looking at this here, and we have a trailing P. Broadcom is by far the highest, but AMD is high, but we don't really care that much about that. But my does NVIDIA look cheap here? You know what I'm saying? On FinViz, I think it's somewhere around 20 right now, but I could be wrong. I'll type it in here in a second, and after I go through this. So we have a 27.974 P. FinViz has AMD like 15, 16 right now, and then a 16.74 2-year forward P. Okay, so all right. That is looking juicy, especially when you look at next year's EPS growth. So your 2-year forward at 16, and then you're going to have 92% EPS growth with 362.82% earnings per share growth next year, which is nowhere near Broadcom's. And you start to think, you know what I mean? Broadcom's 2-year forward PE isn't that high either. And all three of these are looking quite attractive. You know what I mean? Especially with all this fear coming in. And there was something about China, like going to work on their own chips. Okay, like these guys are even being allowed to sell very many chips to China at all in the first place. Okay, so that's going to hurt them that much, right? It's probably not going to hurt them that much. But this is not financial advice, and it's all my opinion. But it's just the way I'm looking at it and seeing things. All right, so I want to see current year expected revenue growth. I don't know how this number is 152%. Especially, I don't see, maybe I'm wrong. I don't see how NVIDIA is going to grow 152% revenue this coming year. And I definitely, you know what I mean? That would put them at $300 billion or more in revenue in this next coming year. With a guide of, what did they guide on their earnings call? $44 billion or something like that. Somewhere between, I think, $43 and $45 billion. I think it was 43.5 plus or minus 2%. So we could maybe see 45 if they beat that. I mean, that's what NVIDIA has been doing. They've been beating revenue. So everybody knows they sandbag. So we could see them hit $45 billion, but all of a sudden, are they going to jump up to $55 billion? then 65, then 75, and even then, if they jumped up like that, which would be absolutely incredible, right? Because you take 75 and 65, that's 140, plus 55 and 45, that's, 100, that's $240 billion in revenue, which is $110 billion, that's $110 billion more in revenue. But that's absolutely incredible. Like, if you think about, like, can they put up a $75 billion quarter this year? Whew, that's a hard push, right? To even think about that. Because that would be, $75 billion would be right in the neighborhood of 100% revenue growth Q4 year over year from this past quarter, right? Okay. Now, we all know, if we listen to earnings calls, that AMD was talking about a lift in the gross margins, right? So we're likely to see gross margins come up, and I believe it was 51%. So this number's off. I believe it was 51%. We can Google that real quick. Let's go ahead and Google that real quick. Or Bing it, whatever, so... Yeah, 51%. So AMD's, a little bit better than what 1000X. AMD today announced financial results for the fourth quarter and full year of 2024. Fourth quarter revenue was a record $7.7 billion. Gross margin was 51%. Operating income was $871 million. Net income was $482 million, and diluted earnings per share was 29%. Okay, so let's go back to 1000X. So their gross margins are a little bit better than it says here, right? And NVIDIA's Q4's gross margins were like 73%, so a little bit down. But that's because Blackwell ramp, right? So whatever. NVIDIA's probably going to bring their margins back up, despite any fears of cheaper chip competition by AMD. Okay. All right. Now, what I really want to go into is this PEG ratio. AMD is really, and I mean really low here, right? A lot of these metrics, they're far lower, like a 2.76 on price to book. Price to free cash flow, though, they can't beat NVIDIA or Broadcom, which is kind of ugly. You'd like to see that better, and I believe we will see that better. All right, so now I want to go to the FinViz, and we'll take a look at FinViz here. And oops, I didn't mean to do that. And we'll take a look at FinViz, and we'll take a look at NVIDIA forward PE here. And then we'll take a look. Trading, it bounced a little bit today, huh? From what it was doing pre-market, I would imagine. Let's see. Yeah, it bounced a little bit. Anyways, so FinViz has it trading at a 19.91 forward PE. Now, it also has next year's EPS far less than what it's saying, than what it's saying on 1000X, if I do believe. Let's go next year EPS growth. So it's got to trade in half of that, right? It's got to trade in next year's EPS 26.89. But I want to take a look at AMD, right? AMD here has a 15.76 forward PE, and next year's earnings per share growth is only 32%. Now, if we go to 1000X, next year's EPS growth is 362%. So here's where I'm at. I'm just thinking, when I think about AMD and I go through everything and I start thinking about how much money is going to be spent in CapEx, right? NVIDIA's not going to pull a $400 billion year. Not likely. Very, very unlikely. And let's say they did pool $200 billion of that $300 billion CapEx spend by the big players. And likely they're going to pull quite a substantial amount from the big players. And if there would be only 40%, then that would be that NVIDIA would pull somewhere, or 46%, somewhere in the neighborhood of $400 billion in revenue. But they're not going to be able to. They're not going to be able to do that because you would have to make $100 billion a quarter just to pool that, which means there's a lot of pie left on the table for AMD at this cheap level, and a little bit of pie on the table for Broadcom and their A6 chips. I don't think that any of these companies is a bad buy at this moment in time. They've all been obliterated. They've all been just absolutely crushed. And so when we start to think about how they've all just been absolutely crushed recently into this, extreme fear-mongering, Wall Street is just out here destroying these stocks. On China, I believe there was a little bit of news. Let's see, China chip news. Okay, let's see. Let's read about this real quick. It's a 2-minute read, so we'll just bang it out. China plans to issue guidance to encourage the use of open source RISC-V chips nationwide for the first time. 2 sources briefed on the matter said, as Beijing accelerates efforts to curb the country's dependence on Western-owned technology, the policy guidance on boosting the use of RISC-V chips, which I don't even know what those are yet, so I'm going to go into that, could be released as soon as this month, although the final date could change, the source said. So this is just speculation, first. It is being drafted jointly by 8 government bodies, including the Cyberspace Administration of China, China's Ministry of Industry and Information Technology, the Ministry of Science and Technology, and the China National Intellectual Property Administration, they added. The sources declined to be named as the policy discussions were still underway. Also, makes it even sound more like speculation, the 4 ministries did not respond to requests for comment. Shares in several Chinese chip design firms jumped during the afternoon trading, with the CSI All-Share Semiconductor Products and Equipment Index reversing early losses to rise by as much, or early losses to rise by as much as 2.5%. VeriSilicon rose by the daily 10% limit, while ASR, Microelectronics, Shanghai, and Logic Infotech and 3Peak gained 8.6 and 15.4%. RISC-V is an open source technology that is used to design a range of less sophisticated chips, from those in smartphones to CPUs for artificial intelligence servers. Okay, so these are going to be less sophisticated. So what are we looking at here? If they're going to be less sophisticated than AMD or NVIDIA or Broadcom, then these big companies are still, if AMD and NVIDIA and Broadcom are allowed to sell anything to China after Trump gets done with his mess of stuff, so still these big companies are going to have to elect to choose to go for AMD and NVIDIA regardless, right? Because they're still going to have to run their stuff. So it competes globally with proprietary and more commonly used chip architecture technology, including x86, dominated by U.S. firms Intel and AMD, and ARM, developed by SoftBank Group, owned ARM Holdings. Lower costs attract chip designers. In China, state entities and research institutes have eagerly embraced RISC-V in recent years, seeing it as geopolitically neutral. Chinese chip designers are attracted by its lower cost, but the government has yet to mention it in policy. Its widening use in the country has been greeted warily in the United States as friction between Washington and Beijing intensifies, especially over technology. In 2023, Reuters reported that some U.S. lawmakers were putting pressure on the Biden administration to restrict American companies from working on the technology over concerns that Beijing was exploiting its own open source nature to advance its own semiconductor industry. China's largest for-profit RISC-V intellectual property or providers include Alibaba, Zhuangtai, and startup Nuclear System Technology, which sell commercial RISC-V processor chips to designers. Industry executives at an event focused on RISC-V that was organized by Zhuangtai last week said the popularity of DeepSeek could also boost adoption of RISC-V as the Chinese AI startups models run efficiently on less powerful chips. Now, I'm going to go ahead and say that they got somehow H100s running that stuff. There's almost no way that they are going to run this on less powerful chips. Maybe they do. I don't know. Just my opinion. Smaller companies that want to use AI and DeepSeek could turn to chip designs with RISC-V architecture, said Sun Hajiao, a manager of China's mobile system integration and ICT equipment provider. Even if RISC-V solution priced at 10 million yuan might only reach about 30% of the level of NVIDIA or Huawei. Buying 3 sets means the overall cost might still be lower, he said during the event. I think this is a breakthrough point. Okay. All right. So that's all done. I just wanted to throw my thoughts on the fact that I believe that with AMD's ability to build the most powerful supercomputer in the world, that they are set up. I mean, like, if you think about El Capitan, I think I'll go into that, and I might make a video on it tomorrow or tonight or something and kind of throw it on here. I'll do some research while I'm sitting at work. I get about an hour and a half where I just do nothing. So I'll take a moment and I'll take a real deep dive into the El Capitan setup and all of that. And I'll let you guys know what I think about it. Sorry, my camera isn't working. I don't know why. Or I would make a face video with my face in it, kind of like Jeremy does. But I just wanted to kind of throw that in there and put this all together for you and have a true thought process on the amount of money that's actually being spent this year, and the fact of the matter that it's just too much for NVIDIA to capture all on its own, and which leaves a lot on the table for AMD. Because even if NVIDIA got $200 billion from the hyperscalers, that would only be half of the revenue. And that would be $120 billion less than the hyperscalers, big boy players, are spending, right? And we just got to think, even if NVIDIA got $150 billion, so not even half of what the hyperscalers are spending, that would be $300 billion, and that'd be a triple up in revenue year over year, right? A triple up if they're getting half just from the hyperscalers or the big players there. So even if they just got $150 billion, that would be 300 million or 300 billion, right? And so when we think about 300 billion, then we think that's a triple up. And I don't know that that's realistic for NVIDIA to be even grab, especially when they're guiding for a $43 billion first quarter, right? Which would mean that they would have to come in and their last 3 quarters would have to total up at $300 billion. Their last 3 quarters would have to total up to somewhere around $255 billion. And so if you divide that by 3, you're basically saying that the company has to provide $85 billion in revenue on average over the last 3 quarters of the year. I just don't see it. Just don't see it. They're going to put up some incredible numbers, sure. But that leaves a lot on the table for AMD this year. And that leaves a lot on the table for 2027, 2026, 2027, 2028. So we'll see. We'll see. I might be wrong. I mean, this is just my opinion. It's not financial advice of any sort. It's just my opinion. So anyways, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stop the video and hope you guys like it.